Loibner-Waitkus.
Okay, I'm Alan Loibner-Waitkus, and this is A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. And now, as I noted in your notes on William Faulkner, he's considered by most, if not all, to be the best American writer we've had ever. So, need to note that. I also know, A Rose for Emily is not my favorite short story by Faulkner. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good short story. I just think Barn Burning is far superior to the to A Rose for Emily. I think Rose for Emily is a little gimmicky, but you have to remember the end and that gimmick would be something at the time that was completely unheard of. And that's what brings me into my first real point about this is what we consider, there's a beetle on me, Southern Gothic. And that's just our fancy way of saying a horror story, okay, from the South. This was a big sort of Southern thing, and while you may not consider the ending to be that much horror, it was certainly groundbreaking at the time, and we'll really get into that when we get in there a little later. But let's go ahead and break down the story a little bit. And first off, Faulkner breaks this story down into 5 sections, and it's told in medias res. We've talked about this before. It's a Latin term meaning, in the middle of the plot. Now, while this is not exactly the middle, as we've seen in some other works, it's closer to the end, but there is things that happen after this. So there's a lot of, jumping around in time, and you really need to pay attention as you're reading, because I'm not going to, retell every little detail for you. You need to pay attention to that order, because the time situation here really matters a lot, okay? The first thing that I think we need to discuss before we even move into the actual plot itself is the narrator. The narrator is unknown, okay? But it's important that it is someone in the story. And a lot have so making it first person. This is going to be a test question on your midterm, I guarantee it. So you need to know it's first person simply because that person says we. Now, I read it as it doesn't matter who the person is, right? It's a townsperson. A lot of people and critics and student writers have speculated on who the narrator is. Everyone from Toby, which I don't know how that would be possible based on the plot, to specific other people. Some people actually claim it's written plurally, that the community as a whole writes it. Is it male? Is it female? We don't know. We do know that it's important there because it is limiting. Now, we do know that narrators, or when stuff is told in first or third person, generally third person, it can be omniscient or limited, which we saw in the other two, right? Which is third person limited. We see things from Waythorn's perspective, but not from the other characters. This, we really don't see anything other than the townspeople's thoughts. So let's move through the plot first, okay? We open up with, and I may tell this a little out of order. I may force myself into chronological order, but we start with Miss Emily dying and the whole town showing up and addressing Miss Emily as a care and a burden, okay? She comes from a rich family who left, and this is going to go back to that Old South versus New South, which I'll hit on probably a couple of times during the course of this video. She's from the Old South, and the money based on plantations and that was earned before Reconstruction is quickly fading, and with no new income there, that's important because whites, especially from the old school, are really struggling to deal with life without slave labor and without that kind of thing. We've got, again, a woman who's not making any money, who has Toby, the African-American servant, who is working, and we can assume for room and board here, we don't know, but he becomes a part of this as we move through. So anyway, back to plot. We start with her death and kind of move through what's happened in her life, okay? We know that when her father dies, and so I'm going to hit some analysis as we move through, that she would not accept that death, right? She didn't accept that her father was dead. She refused to allow them to do anything with the body. She denied it, and finally she allowed them to take the body and would admit to the death. So we know she has a problem with death. The other thing that's interesting here is we know, based on the aunt or aunt, depending on how you pronounce it, in the South I think we tend to say aunt, who was had mental problems, another relative who had mental issues. So we know going into this that Miss Emily has a problem with death and some mental issues. Okay, so the father dies, and we have this issue of taxes that come in now. Colonel Sartoris, who is a very famous character remember this is set in Jefferson, which is in a fictional city in Yoknapatawpha County, which is a fictional county by Faulkner. And if you want more information on this, you can read or listen to my video notes, watch my video notes on Faulkner. But Colonel Sartoris is a character we see in a lot of works by Faulkner. In fact, in Barn Burning, you'll see that Sardi is named after Colonel Sartoris. So a very respected Civil War colonel who's still around running this town, and he's the one who says, Miss Emily has no taxes in Jefferson, basically saying that the town owes the father money because the father gave money to the town. Now, if you're an astute reader, you'll realize pretty quickly this is BS, right? It's just a way that Colonel Sartoris can protect Miss Emily from paying taxes and from taking things away, and it's a nice way to sort of trick a woman, make her believe that she doesn't owe taxes. We've got the idea she won't get a mailbox, she won't come in and address these things. And in fact, when they finally come down to address her, which you'll note there is when the city council is beginning to get newer members, right, who are more in tune with the New South, who think, women should pay taxes, we shouldn't do this, we should not allow her to get away with not doing this. And she never... Miss Emily's a great character. She's one of those sort of like Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. She's this really kind of classic character. She doesn't ask them to sit. She is sort of rude to them, and it's sort of a funny situation. Now they move through, and the father, and this is important, when the father was alive, he did everything to keep men away from Miss Emily. So we know, she has no real experience here dating. And once the father dies, and this is when we get into a key character here, who is Homer Barron. Okay, Homer Barron, let me rewind. We're going to stop here from Homer Barron for a second. I want to get back to race, because Colonel Sartoris made the comment that he was the one who required women to wear aprons on the street when they were on the street in town. And that's an interesting thing when it comes to race, and we're going to pop back to that. But let's move on with Homer Barron. So she meets Homer Barron. Now, think of Homer Barron this way. He's a Yankee, number one, and as a Southerner, you just do not date a Yankee, right? So there's that problem. He's very middle class at best, right? He travels. He's a traveling guy who sort of enjoys doing construction and all of these things that we would have done during Reconstruction. Now, one of the major issues here with him is the way in which Faulkner addresses, it says that he enjoyed the company of men and he liked hanging out with younger fellas. Now, when I originally began teaching this story, and I've had queer theory classes, and I actually have taught several things from that perspective, and that's really where you kind of look for gay references and that kind of thing. Years ago, I would have just said, he's not gay, shut up, don't even bring it up, that's not what Faulkner intended, and most critics agreed with me. I'm seeing more and more kind of pull towards, well, maybe he was gay, maybe that's what he meant. I'm going to say, and I would love to make him gay here, I'm going to say I just don't think that's what Faulkner was doing. I think it's just a coincidence in his wording that we interpret it that way. I could be wrong here. Okay, he could have been gay, which you can make fit into the reasoning behind why she has to get rid of him, or why the relationship won't work. But I just don't get the feeling that that's what Faulkner intended. If you want to write an essay either direction on this is actually a good essay topic, and one that's really popular right now. So think that through. But the reason she can't be with Homer Barron is his class, that he's a Yankee, that he what he does for a living. And, more I think this hangs out with the fellows and all of that. It's just basically he's not the marrying type. He's kind of a for lack of better words, hit it and quit it kind of guy, right? He's going to, move on, and he's a drifter in a way. And so you have that. Now, when he's dating Miss Emily, this is interesting, that the townspeople don't know what to do. Okay, they are just sort of in shock that she would do this, and so they call relations in Alabama. She has no relations in Jefferson anymore, and so they are coming in, and we would assume to tell her that she can't be with this middle class, lower class Yankee, right? And so he disappears during that time, but returns. Now, soon after, Miss Emily buys arsenic, and this is an interesting scene in the whole thing. And again, I like this. It goes back to Mrs. Emily's character. She goes to the pharmacy and wants a poison. What's the best poison? And the pharmacist says arsenic. It'll kill anything. And so she says, I want arsenic. And he says, okay, I need to know what it's for. I've got to write this down. Now, most people would just lie, okay, and say, okay, it's for rats. If that's what you want to hear, it's for rats. And Miss Emily says, nothing. I want arsenic. And he sort of says, I need to know what for. And she says, I want arsenic. And won't tell him that it's for rats, or lie to him about what it's going to be used for. Now, we know it's going to be used later on Homer Barron. The interesting thing is the pharmacist writes for rats on the thing. Now, again, we can call that, as my father would say, COYA, right? Cover your ass. But CYA, sorry. But also we can see that as verbal irony. And we talked about that in our literary terms. The irony being that he meant literally for rats, okay? Even if he doesn't think that's what she's going to use it for, that was the intent. But you can also read it as a double meaning. If she's going to use it on Homer Barron, maybe it's because he's a rat, because he's going to leave her, because he's treating her poorly, because he, even you could argue slept with her, which would have been scandalous at the time, and had no intention of marrying her. And so that's an interesting sort of aspect there. Now, after the arsenic is bought, they all say, well, of course, she will kill herself, right? She's going to commit suicide, but she doesn't. She's around, and pretty soon a smell starts to come from the house. And Judge Stevens, who's, again, would be an elected official, right, in the town, sort of county judge person, mayor, whatever you want to argue he is here, people keep coming to him saying, well, get rid of the smell. Her house stinks. And he makes the comment, would you accuse me of having a lady stink? And again, that's an Old South attitude, whereas the New South people are like, yes, tell her to clean it up. She stinks. The house stinks. But you'll notice that what they do is they come at night with lime and spread lime just to get rid of the smell, and the smell eventually goes away. Now, we know from the ending that smell is the decaying body of Homer Barron, and that Homer Barron has decayed. And, the smell eventually stops from a dead body, right? It doesn't smell at first, then it begins to stink, and then the smell eventually goes away. So we know that is what's happened here. We move through some other things with taxes and the mailboxes and the city wanting to do something about her, and it never really happens. Eventually, also, this idea of China painting is really interesting, because this is a skill really no one wants, but the older members of the community kind of, to give Miss Emily spending money, send their children out of obligation, noblesse oblige, to her China painting lessons so that she'll have an income. But as the New South rises, as we get the people who aren't going to do this, we see fewer and fewer students coming along. Okay. I think pretty much there I've hit the major points of the plot here until we move on to her death, and so we kind of come back past where we began. She's died, and the community is gathering around the house. And what's interesting is, as soon as we know she's died and the door's opened, Toby, the servant, African American servant, leaves very, very quickly. And that's interesting too. We'll move back to race in the story in a second, but he leaves very quickly, and as they move upstairs, they discover, again, they have to sort of break in to get upstairs. They discover the body of what we know based on the silver toiletry kit and pajamas and things that she bought earlier is Homer Barron. And next to his body, of course, is an indention in the pillow and Miss Emily's gray hair. That was clearly Miss Emily's. Now that goes back to being able to read these sections effectively. You'll notice that Miss Emily sort of grade suddenly older. She was older when she went gray, and this would imply that she's been sleeping with him relatively recently. Okay, so the body has been slept with since then. So let's move in a little bit into that idea and what is sort of the shocking Southern Gothic aspect of this. One of the most common questions is this necrophilia? Now, I want to do a little bit of an explanation. Again, I'm on video here, so I have to be very careful with how I address this. But one of the most common, and I think this is important, it's going to be important when we get to Flannery O'Connor and some other things. We know necrophilia, and I'll put the definition up here, sexual feelings or activities that involve dead bodies. Is she sleeping with him or not once he's dead? I mean, the logistics of that seem pretty impossible, whether it's sexual or not. The point here is, of course, that she killed him because she couldn't have him, whether that be because he wanted to leave, because he was a drifter and a traveling man and wasn't going to marry her, or that she couldn't marry him because her family wouldn't allow it. It was déclassé to marry him, or he was gay. I mean, again, don't like that theory, but if that's a theory you want to go with, go for it. But I want to look a little bit at paraphilias and fetishes and kind of describe the difference between that, because I find that that's the most common, one of the most common things that students want to talk about, but yet don't have the terminology correct on this. The first thing is we sort of lump everything into the idea of fetish, okay? But sadomasochism is a fetish. One thing's a fetish, one thing's not. The term fetish actually means a need or desire for an object or body part for sexual excitement, okay? So to have a fetish, those are people who get sexual excitement out of high-heeled shoes or elbows or feet or those kinds of things, again, an object, a body part, or a specific object. Sadomasochism, which is probably the most common form of paraphilia that we discuss, is not a fetish, okay? It is what is called a paraphilia. Paraphilia is a pattern of recurring sexual arousing mental imagery or behavior that involves unusual and specifically socially unacceptable sexual practices, okay? That fits really much anything, but it's sexual practices, not the obsession with an object. So necrophilia, okay, sexual feelings toward the dead, would fit into paraphilia, not fetish. And now don't get confused and or offended here, because it says unusual or socially unacceptable. Pedophilia is a paraphilia, as well as necrophilia, both of which are illegal, right? As opposed to sadomasochism, which is a perfectly legal paraphilia, okay? But it's generally not, I don't know what the statistics on this would show, but make it socially acceptable. So we have a very wide range of philias, from people who want to be dressed up into diapers and treated like babies to, Lord, the list is, I'm sure, endless as far as paraphilias and fetishes both go. But I wanted to explain that idea there. Now, back to that. I mean, is that what she's into? I'm going to go with no, but it's still a shocking and dirty kind of ending to this whole thing. The other thing that I want to address here is race, which isn't, a lot of people don't make too much out of this with this story, but I think it's interesting. Number one, we go to Colonel Sartoris and the idea that women on the streets are forced to wear aprons. and I see what Faulkner's doing here. It's interesting here, and I was actually discussing this with a class the other day, and I said, why does he make them wear aprons? I get the answers, because they should be in the, all of these different things. But when it comes down to it, it's just a matter of during Reconstruction, you have a lot of white people who aren't happy that they lost this battle with the Civil War, with the Emancipation Proclamation, with what the Supreme Court is doing as far as allowing segregation or desegregation and those sorts of things. And so what we do, I think, as a community is when we lose a battle and we can't so much that what we do towards minority groups, whether that be women, even though they're not in the minority, whether that be African Americans, whether that be gay men and lesbians, and I'm going to talk about transgender stuff in a second, is about control. Again, is there any reason for them to really wear an apron on the street? No. Why are we doing it? So as white people, we can say, you have to wear an apron on the street. Okay, it's about control, and a lot of you are going to disagree with me on this and start losing your mind, and your heads may explode. But I see a very similar thing going on right now with transphobia and this idea of bathrooms. Okay, we don't have that many concrete examples of, or really any I know of actual transsexuals doing things in bathrooms that they weren't supposed to do. And before, you could have had a man, before we make these laws, we could have a man dress up as a woman and sneak into the bathroom to molest little girls. But we just don't see that happening. If somebody's going to do a criminal activity, they're just going to go in there and lie in wait, right? In some place where they're not going to get caught. What we're really doing, and this is again my political opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, but what we're doing is really endangering the lives of the people who use the bathroom of their birth gender. Again, if you've got someone who is dressed as a woman who goes into who identifies as a woman who goes into the men's room, there's a good chance somebody in there is going to hate crime that person because they look different, or a lot more controversial may be a woman who identifies as a man and looks like a man going into a woman's room, and the situation is going to end ugly. And I don't really know what you people are doing in the bathrooms that is so sacred that nobody else can see it, or that something weird's going to happen. I mean, I've never done anything in a bathroom that a woman couldn't be standing next to me and it would have bothered me, or whatever, or that if I had gone in the women's bathroom that would have been particularly offensive to women. But I think it more has to do with this, Obergefell v. Hodges made same-sex marriage legal. That battle was lost. Again, I think a battle over control. And now we see this bathroom issue, and I think it's more just we want to tell people who are transgender, not me, but as a society, a lot of people want to say, you're different, so we're going to control you and tell you what bathroom to go in. Now, if you disagree with me and you have feelings on this, do a little research and think your way through it. Are we really accomplishing anything by doing this? Okay, or is this just your gut reaction? I mean, look at the statistics. I think more senators have been arrested for illegal activities in bathrooms than transgender people. So, think that through. I think it's got to do with control. The other issue here is the servant, Toby, bailing, right? Nobody ever sees him again once he allows them into the house. And I think what's interesting with that is he knows that there's a dead body. And this relates to a lot of what's going on right now with police and that kind of thing. And I'm not going to get into the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter debate here. But we know if there is a dead person in the house, a dead white man in the house, and an African American there, if you're the African American, you're going to probably want to get the hell out of Dodge, whether you had anything to do with it or not. And you could argue here, Toby had to know that body's been there. He's the servant. And so he could actually be, convicted possibly under knowledge of a corpse or hiding evidence or something to that idea. But I think it's more about he does not want to be lynched for killing a white man or hanged or punished in any way. when it's very possible that as a society they could say Miss Emily could not possibly be responsible for this. It has to be Toby. And so again, he's doing that sort of thing. That's an overview. I know there are people out there who've given much deeper ones on this and done a lot more plot retelling, but I'm not going to do that for you. You need to read the story, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you soon with some more on Faulkner and barn burning.